Hello, this is Arcades, and welcome to a bit of a, um, I'm not going to say straight up tutorial video, but I am going to consider it a tips and tricks, and basically my own understanding of, well, compressed gases and how they affect fluid flow. And, yeah, I've seen a few things out there that were put out that, well, not completely wrong, they are misleading because they're not the entire picture. And, well, I'm not going to say I know everything about this subject. I am going to definitely give you my thoughts and opinions of observations I have seen and give you actual demonstrations of the stuff I've seen. Because, like every other video I do, I try to say, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show you it. So this is what's going to be here. Tongue twister. So, yeah. So, hope you like what you watch. Hope you enjoy what you see. If you do, remember to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Helps out the channel immensely, and, yeah, let's try to tackle this. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is the compressed gases. As you can see here, I've been working on this for a while because I have a my G2 Optimus Prime. I've been reworking it, got it compatible with the compressed gases, so it works to transport fluids. I've been working on my oil refinery, which I made a video not long ago talking about some of the things I figured out from that and how I was working on that, which I will be showing both of those later as practical applications to what I'm going to show you here. Okay? Now, I'm going to be straightforward. I'm not going to go through every single type of configuration that you can put out there for pumping and such, but I'm going to give you a pretty large overview of what is there. Now, the first thing is there was I seen something that was talking about the placement of filters. Kind of got me riled up to make this video, I guess, to be honest. But I need to definitely clear this about this. So we're going to look over here. Now you'll see there's some extra stuff on here. These are all part of the video that I have planned out, and they will be addressed. But for now, right in here at the beginning, you just need to worry about is we have these tanks. You'll see in there is a barometer, there is a fluid and a gas sensor, as well as the spawner. They have all diesel. They all have diesel spawned in them. They are all 26,578 and some change. And since nothing is actually protruding into them, they all have the same value. All the equipment is on the exterior, so we'll not be changing the interior of the volume. Now, first lineup is putting a pair of filters on the exterior. I guess I should start with a caveat. The thing is, when it comes to the compressed gases, as I noticed when I was experimenting myself and trying to figure this stuff out, let me rephrase this, you can use just a filter on an input to block fluid from coming out into the pump. So, for example, here, my keyboard is a lot smaller than my previous one. Okay, so like right here, you see I've got a fluid filter here plus a gas filter before the line. And the idea is it blocks the air from going through the pump into the next room. And this relieves the air out. This one, I have it in the opposite, is afterwards, you get all the power of the pump to push through, and it just pushes the air up and out while pushing the fluid through and down. So, yeah, there is an actual speed difference to this. But it's kind of interesting, though, because it has to deal partially with the pressure in the tanks. Now, here's the interesting thing. You notice we have a 48 and a 38. And the difference here is, one, we've got all these ports from these guys sitting here. Omit. So some of the fluid has sat in the ports here. And some of them are sitting in the ports for this and this. But the ports stop here, so these two ports aren't soaking in any of the diesel. So thus, the difference of the starting quantity. But we're going to take a look at the speed. Now, down here, I've got all these tanks tied into this, so you're going to see all the tanks running at the same time. But what we're going to look at first is right here. That's tank 1 and that's tank 2. These are displaying the flow rate. Now, the thing is this flow rate is going to jump up because there's a large amount of pressure in both of those. So we're going to run this for a little bit, and we're going to see the difference in the total. But the one thing that's going to be different, however, is because the starting pressure is different, there's going to be a little bit of difference. So you need some time to run out that difference and let it level out. So we're going to start our pumps. It's going to run all of them, but we're only paying attention to the first two for right now. So we're going to watch this. And as you can see, the flow rate's 150 there. We got 80 there. And it's corresponding there. Okay. Now, as you can see, ran about 2,600 on this one. This one only got 1,500. So having your these in front, not exactly, not exactly as helpful. It's not near as fast. Even though we had the greater pressure on this side, it ends up being lower because it's already spent through all the freaking gas. So right there is already a difference in speed. So keep your stuff on the past the pump. But here's the thing, you always need a path for both. Whenever you have the liquids and the gases in there, the pipe is going to be transporting both. You're never going to have exclusively one or the other. Even when you have the fluid relief, the fluid relief valve or the gas relief valve on the front acting as a filter, there will be gas in the line. Not past it. Past it is going to be just fluid if you're using the liquid. But there is gas that's going to be stuck in the port of the liquid relief filter that's going to slow down the passing of stuff through it. So you need a place to relieve that gas. It will also get stuck in the different ports along the line, so you need to make sure you have ways of relieving that gas out of the line and out of the system and into a different destination. In the case of this system, it's just merely letting out the gas out right at the spot where they split and taking the gas out, just releasing it to the atmosphere. And as you saw, in that brief stint, having it past the pump is faster than having it before the pump. Now, we're going to look at another setup. We're going to look at, just to double check, the fact of being before. Make sure there's not something we're not missing that could cover up the efficiency of having it before. So I've put on another pump here, so it actually tries to draw the gas from the line through the filter. And either we can eject it back into the tank or into the atmosphere. Right now, by default, is set up to push it right back into the tank. I have a flow valve here so that the pressure from the tank isn't flowing through this line back out. One of my tests while I was setting this up, I ended up just spitting oil or diesel from the filter out. So this also keeps the diesel from leaving the tank. So now if we compare the first three tanks, So this is the one with the filter set after the pump, filters before the pump, and this is before the pump, but being rerouted through a pump, another pump, to pull the gases out, either back into the tank or out. In this case, the default will be back into the tank. All right, we're gonna run that last test one more time. So space. And we have a liter second, 78. All right, let's stop it here. As you can see, we got 1700, 1703, and 2400. So you can see this tank, it's slightly faster than this one, but they still have the same issue of that it doesn't like being before the pump. The exhausting of the extra gases before the pump, because it's not picking any extra power up from the pump. It's literally just working off the pressure from the tank, and that's not very much once you get going. Whereas the first tank, those gases are getting pushed out with pressure from the pump and getting expelled at a much faster speed, so thus it's getting the... At least that is my theory of what's going on. So, all right, next up. Next setup we have here. So, this were the first three. Now I decided, since having the filters after were faster, we're now going to set it up so I figured, why don't we route the gases into the tank like we did here, but we're going to see if it makes any difference on speed to here. So in other words, we're taking the excess gas, and instead of venting it out like here, here, and here, we're just going to put straight back in the tank, but we're going to do it again, pump it into the tank after the pump. Now, just from the numbers alone, from the initial run, we have 2,500. Was that the fourth one? Yeah, 2,500 to this 24.5. And that's just from the quick run I did a moment ago. So now we're going to run the test fresh one more time to observe tank 4, which has the pump back in setup. So we just run that. As you can see, pump 4. As they settle down, as they expend all that extra gas, and they're relieving the pressure, so all the values are starting to normalize. And you'll see that, yeah, we're getting just slightly faster than the first tank. The color rainbow. But yeah, so it's still heading up just a little faster than the first tank, and they're way faster than the other two tanks. So we end up stopping it. Compare the values, and we have 38, 27, 26, and 36. And the thing is the time, they're all running at the same time. They're all running with the same one singular pump, so there's not a huge difference about when I stop. Other than the fact that right at the beginning, they have the greatest amount of pressure to push through the system, so they always have super high flows at the beginning. Once you clear through that and it all stabilizes, things are good. You can actually rate and see how well the system is doing. Okay, so we've looked through the first 4 tanks. Now we need to look at the 5th one. Now this one's not a big, huge change. All I did was take the setup for this one and just added a pump to the gas line, which pumping back into the tank, and it was just basically to see if it would actually increase the speed at which, you know, cleared out the line, so maybe we would get more fluid through. So we're going to run that real quick. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, that should be the central one, so you know pressure is about 55. And we'll start it up. Okay, so I ran it for a little bit. So the first value, the first tank, we got 2643. This is kind of going to be our baseline for most of the time. I'm going to use this one as kind of our baseline. So this one's at 26, got 18, 1882, 2679, and finally with the tank we just ran, 2750. So it gives a little bit of boost over the previous one. So it's something to look into. But I don't think it's super necessary overall, but it is something that can help improve the flow by a little bit. Hell, you put the bigger pumps on there, it probably could do it even better. Now, for the sixth one, sixth tank I have here, I took the straight up regular flow over here, reinstalled it here, but I added a pumping system for removing the gas from this tank. So when I go to turn the system on, this pump activates, it pulls everything through here and exhausts the gas from this tank out and just throws the liquid back into here. Now, technically you could go ahead and put like a, gas relief valve so it only pulls the gas in, but then you're still, like I said before, you're stuck putting fluid stuck in the port of the inbound of the pump, and that could eventually clog it. So it's best just to let it process and then send it through back into this tank. Always making sure the gas and fluids have a way to exit the system into a tank or wherever is going to make all of it just smooth out and make it flow easily. It's always about getting something out of the way so the next thing in line can get in its place. Okay. So, we're going to give this a reset and then rerun it. Alright, here we go. So yeah, we're looking at this one right here. Now, in case I didn't mention it earlier, the white number is the flow rate in meters per second. The orange one is the content, the liquid content of diesel. The green one, that is your barometric pressure. Alright, we're going to stop here. We've gotten 3,000 in there. So the baseline is we have 3,000 here. 21, 22, 32, 32, and finally 31. So just a pressure relief isn't necessarily going to fix things either. You can see we have the pressure up there, and yeah. So, next one on our list. So now, each of these are now going to have the pressure relief on the bottom side. So they're all going to be relieving pressure, and it's going to be using a pump to create the demand to release it. Now, up here, what we're going to have going on here is we're taking this setup as well, just copied it again, and now we're going to start adding pressure to a single pump's worth of pressure to the system. We're just going to be pumping air in. We're going to try to create more pressure in the system and try to improve the flow by seeing if we can add more pressure to the system. Because the more pressure you have in there, that means more pushing the fluid out. So, yeah, let's give this a run. Now, just as a preliminary number, as you can see, 34, 78, 31, 32, and even versus baseline, 30. So you should have a pretty good idea, because you notice they're all continuing to be in the same order of who is winning out with each of these increases in efficiency. So we start it again. Notice flow rate. Now this is the flow rate of what's going into the tank. So not in the entire system, but just going into that tank. I figured that was the cleanest method of trying to measure this of the flow rate was the receiving tank. As you can see, we're about 95 here. This one's sitting at 68. There's 71, 69, 48, 47, and 60? Yeah, 60. Alright. Stop that, come to the number, you can see we got 47, 4,000, 42, 42, 29, actually close to 3,000 with that one. Almost 29 on that one, and our baseline is 39, pretty much 4,000. So number 6 is a huge improvement over the first one. The next one we're going to take a look at, I was trying to figure out, is like, okay, so adding pressure works. So what if we now take the pressure from the system and again pump it back into the tank? So we're conserving the pressure instead of just dumping it out through an exhaust port. Now, I guess we can take a look at the preliminary numbers. As you can see, 5,000. And the pressure of 9 versus the 8.7. So, as you can see there already, it's going to be faster. You're going to transfer that stuff even faster. Because you're not losing the pressure, you're just reapplying it. You're taking out of the system, sending it back into the tank to repressurize it so it can be sent through the system again to help carry the system along and create that movement. Alright, here we go. Now we're going to go look at it. As you can see, as we watch the flow rate. Now this one was the last one we looked at. We're doing about 120 right there. It's 125, so let's see, a little bit faster. Nine, 101, 7. Yeah. Now, if you notice, the flow rate is slowly degrading. I think I have a theory on why that happens, and I will get to that in a moment, because I want to look over the last one. Because that theory of the degrading led me to doing something with the final tank to get it up to speed. So, final numbers here for that run: 5196, 4966, 4133, 43, 43, 30, 29, and 41. Yeah, so. Now, here's the thing. The last one's going to be weird. Okay, so, about my theory about the degradation. So, as you're sitting there pumping through, your tank, and this is, like I said, this is my theory. It might be in the right direction. It could be completely wrong, but I think it's pointing in the right direction. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the coding, but this is my opinion. At least this is what my intuition is telling me about what I'm seeing. So when the port goes to get the information of what's in the tank to transfer to the next part in line, it takes a look at the source tank and goes, okay, what percentage of it is gas and what percentage of it is liquid? So if you have a tank that's like 90% full of liquid and 10% gas, it looks at that and says, okay, snapshot of that, sends it down the line. And it will take that percentage from the tank, like a certain percentage from the tank at that ratio. So it will take, say it takes 10% of the tank. at a 1:9 ratio. So 1 liter of gas to 9 liters of liquid, and sends that through. Well, if it's taking a percentage, it's going to constantly degrade. But the problem is that if you're just taking the liquid and pumping it back into the system, well, your percentage of gas gets bigger and bigger versus your percentage of liquid. And even if you don't add it in there, you start losing pressure. Well, that pressure is what helps propel it through the system, which ends up slowing it down. As I will show later, that becomes an issue with the first few tanks. Now, so if you end up taking, by the time you get halfway through your tank, you're now putting for 5 parts gas to 5 parts liquid through that snapshot of data that gets sent through the pipe. Now, I do believe there's a minimum amount, as long as you have like X amount of liquid in the tank. I want to say it sends like a minimum amount. And then once you get to a certain level where it's predominantly gas, it starts changing it. I think that change is right when you start seeing your numbers in the flow rate of your pumps, right here. Say if you're looking at the flow rate through them, when it starts getting above typical liquid numbers, typical liquid number would be about 100 liters a second, 90 to 100. But when you start seeing the 200s, the 300s, and such, through there, then that's kind of a gas, gas is starting to go through. When I was messing with the larger tanks, this became really, really significantly noticeable. On smaller tanks, such as these, it's not as noticeable. So what I'm going to show you really isn't needed on them, because most of the time they just can be handled with the regular systems of like Tank 8 there. Because that's how I've got my G2 Optimus Prime setup, is it actually conforms to the, this secondary System 8 here that I've got set up. System 9 is what I have set up for my refinery in the storage tanks and the distillation tank, which I will show later as a practical application. Here's the thing. What you're going to see is it's going to be technically slower, but it won't be left behind. And it will be keeping up with the 8th tank until it gets to a certain point, and then you will notice that the 8th tank will start to drag behind. And it's at that point where the difference of this particular thing I did will start making that difference. So what I did to set up here. So you see I have the tank, I have the air input there. And we have it fed back into the system. Well, I copied that, and that goes there. You noticed I moved the pump up to here. Because what I ended up doing is I split this tank into 2 tanks using the custom doors to provide a smaller draining tank. This is the tank that is supposed to be actually actively draining. And what I said in that snapshot, that percentage snapshot that it sends through as part of the data, it is looking at the smaller tank. And since the gravity of the fluids going downwards to settle on the bottom doesn't require a pump, it's the physics of the game, it will automatically feed into the lower distillation tank, this lower tank, draining tank, and that snapshot will still be minimum gas pressure to the maximum amount of fluid allowed, and just gets sent through the system at the max speed. Now, like I said, it kind of lags behind, so the rate will be just about the same, but at a certain point, this tank will start to slow down because it will be mostly gas. Well, this one will still maintain its speed, even though slightly slower than this one was. It will maintain that speed longer than this one will. This will pick up to like 1,000 liters per second on that pump. Well, this is still reading like, 200 to 300. And by doing that, you end up stabilizing your flow on the lower end so that while this one will be this 8th tank right here, this setup will be faster for most of the process. This tank will finish faster because it's able to maintain a higher flow on the back end of the thing. And I'm going to actually do a full run on all the tanks now that I've introduced them and showed you this, because this setup will not show what it's good for until you get to the end. So we're going to do that. We're going to do a run, and we're going to do all the tanks through. We're going to stop when the first tank, which, as I'm saying here, will be this tank 9, when it hits 26,000, and then we're going to compare. But we're not done after that. I still got more to talk about, and we're going to talk about that other stuff. So, yeah, let's get this last one ran. Okay, so I have this display over here. We're going to observe it while the tanks are running through. I have tanks 1 through 9. I have them each listed on here. They are labeled. And I do have dials showing their flow rates, and we will be watching that. And as soon as one gets full, hits one, the top of the graph is 26,000, bottom of the graph is 0. Once it hits the top, I will come over and stop the system so we can take a look and observe what the data as it was shown there. So, all right, let's get this started. Okay, so we've hit 26,000 on tank 9. Well, at least got to the top of the graph. Yeah, 26,030. So, here's the end result. This is the race to get the first one to fill its partner tank, so to speak. So you can see right here, tank 2 did the worst, along with tank 3. 1 and 6. 1 and 6 got around the same amount. Yep. And then 4 and 5 got around the same amount. Performance with their setups. And then 7, 8, 9 came around in theirs. So, But yeah, if you notice, like, on the back end, like, it held this setup with the separate tank held its flow a lot stronger, a lot longer than this one did. Because that one dropped down quite a bit at the end there, even though it was still pretty close. But it was just enough that it lost enough speed that it lost this pretty badly. Not super badly, but it was still behind by like 2,000 liters. And over time, as you get those bigger large loads, that makes a difference. And then as you can see, this one, 20,000. And, you know, this, for, you know, normal setups, this will work just fine. So, yeah. Okay, now here's another thing I wanted to kind of touch on. The thing is, it's also about the filters. Now, as you can see, or not the relief valves. So you can see, I copied, you know, these setups over. But there is an actual interesting thing I noticed when I was on a recent stream. So we're going to take these. I'm going to copy them. We're just going to bring these over, and they're going to replace the current system. And as you can see now, I have two filters, or two relief valves, on the lower system and the upper system, running in parallel. Not in series, but in parallel. And there was a 2,000 liter, I believe it was a 2,000 liter, or 2,000 liter difference. I'll try to remember and edit to figure it out. But I want to see the difference now, because while this is running, I'll explain. When I was doing a stream earlier, I noticed I put pumps to add pressure to one of my storage tanks. And I noticed they would only do about 373. So out of curiosity, I just added a second filter in parallel. And they added up to 597. Well, the thing is, when you go to look at the flow values, this thing, 598. 598. That's how fast it's pumping air into there. And even the one up there, 598. Yes, 598. There. So, if that's the max, these pumps can pump air into these receptacles, but it was capping out at 373, but then I added a second filter in parallel, it became equivalent to 597, 598. So now I went ahead and did that to the system to see their overall value increase. As you can see right here, you know, it's combined. Now the flow rate, however, 86 to 82. Not a huge difference here. But I think the difference really shines, again, between these two setups, is when it gets to the bottom end, when this thing starts slowing down, but this one does not. Because it's still using the lower tank to determine that snapshot of data that it sends through the system. Because if you can see right now, this pump says, you know, 450. We're still running 176 here. So we got 81 total there, but 77 here. Because this pump is sending more gas through. Okay. So, this tank hit 26,000, and the difference be about... Okay, a little over 3K. So there wasn't a huge difference here. Or a little under... See, that's just over... Or just over 2,000. Yeah, just over 2,000. So, yeah, still about the same difference overall. So, I guess in this setup, for how small this tank is, it's not a huge deal. But if you start running the larger quantities of gas trying to move in and out, you definitely want to make considerations for it. So, keep that in mind. I can show a practical example when I get to the oil refinery. So, now, here's the next thing on the agenda. What if I told you I could get this setup to actually pump faster than that setup? Like, what? And the only thing I won't have to change any of that setup specifically. I know that sounds vague, right? Well, what I'm referring to, see, the big thing with getting stuff to move is pressure. Believe it or not, having I'm not even sure how to refer to it, but 2 atmospheres on the, less than 2 atmospheres compared to the 1.9, that's really not a big issue. That's not what was stopping this thing. Because I can tell you right now, I can get this tank to go faster than that tank with those 4 pumps. Yes, pretty much those 4 pumps. The second tank, I could do the same. Now, if you notice, this is like the worst performing tank out of all of them. The one where you have the filters in front of the pump. And this is from standing straight from whatever was in the tank, not adding anything. So, we're going to take these 2 tanks, and I'll show you pressure makes a huge difference on the performance of fluids transferring. And we're not even going to remove the pressure that's in these tanks either. Now, what I ended up doing is, like I showed you, I added the 4 pumps to each one. They are on their own triggers because I want to show them specifically. Let me reset this. And we are going to look at those 2 tanks specifically. So, we're going to take this. I'm going to tank 1, tank 2 for the boost, and then give it a second. And now start. See, what I did is I waited for those pumps to max out the pressure, and now we're going to let it run again. And you'll see, because we're looking at tanks 1 and 2, you'll notice their flow rates compared to the previous winner of tank 9. Even on the graph. Still holding strong, both of them. The worst 2 tanks, well, the baseline tank plus the worst performing tank, are holding higher flow rates than the best tank out of the previous setup. Simply because we're adding pressure, we're just pumping in gas to add pressure to that system. However, there is definitely a small caveat to this. That while they are filling faster, they are also adding more gas to that system. Which means when it takes that little data snapshot that I like to call to send through the pipes, the ratios are based off of that. So it still gets to be an issue down the line, but having pressure makes a huge difference in performance. Because as you can see here, Tank 1 and Tank 2 are completely blowing past Tank 8 and 9, which were the best performers. 7, 8, and 9 were like the best performers overall under the last setup before I added this pressure. Because they were slightly adding pressure. They had one pump adding pressure. Now this one has 4 adding pressure. Under the same principles, yeah, same setup. And the same thing for this one. There's no change in their setups at all. You can see pressure slowly building up on, these 2 tanks, but not to a significant degree. At least not right now. Again, we look at the flow rates. Tank 1, top left, versus number 9 on the bottom right. And then Tank 2. They're still holding higher pressure. So with enough pumps, you can actually brute force the system to work. But eventually, these tanks, the receiving tanks, are going to build up with pressure to the point not even brute forcing it with extra pressure will work. Yeah, see, there's Tank 2 now rising above the pack. There we go. Tank 2 finally fell below Tank 8. Yeah, they both just fell below Tank 8. Tank 1 is getting back up. Well, it has been up there. Tank 2, yeah, they've gained some, some flow rate back up. Now, this one is slowing down because it's getting full. For the most part, it's just getting full. I think in my truck, the G2 Optimus Prime, I have like a bunch of outlets letting pressure out as fast as it can go. I think that's good enough. It gets the point across. So, as you can see, you get 21,000, 23,000, 20,000. Took this long for the final tank to catch up to this worst performing tank just because we were adding pressure. Now here's the funny thing. Those pumps are still running and they're still adding pressure. So if I gave it long enough to build enough pressure in there, I could restart the system and they will blow the rest of their fluid out into these tanks before that can even catch up that last bit. That's how much the pressure makes a difference. That's how big of a deal it is to make sure you have your systems pressurized in the proper way to keep the system moving. That makes the biggest difference. Because you can see, I took the baseline and the worst performing tank through the previous setups, and I just blew away, and, even though technically the worst performing tank didn't beat out that tank, it's still, that was a huge increase in speed just by bumping it up with gas. Now, for one last thing that I really want to cover in this is I went ahead and I installed extra pumps on every tank in the back. So every tank has this same thing running right now. These 3 tanks are still going to have their running because they've been running the entire time in the first place. So to make a proper comparison, I need to just basically add 4 pumps to each one because that's what I'm doing. I'm adding 4 pumps to each tank. The ones on the front there will not be running. It's just the ones in the back for this part of the thing. So I'm going to hit my number 6 to get those boosted. And we will wait for each of the tanks to get up to 60 atmospheres. Which, by the way, I didn't say it earlier, but 60 is the max for pressure in a system. 60 is the max. The big thing with that is if you also get a system built up with 60 atmospheres, it shuts down. Like, it just absolutely shuts down. Okay, let's get this started. So now we're looking at the speed of this with 4 extra pumps on the backside. Wait. What's wrong with tank 8? Oh yeah, you see that 60 atmospheres I was talking about a second ago? Jamming up the system? Yeah, here's a good example of that. It gets to 60 atmospheres, it gets jammed. It just won't run at all. Funny thing is I've run this experiment with this like multiple times. It never got jammed. Okay, let me restart. Okay, here we go again. 6 for all the pumps. And then we're just going to start right away. I was going to wait till it built up, but I don't want to get jammed again. So, alright, I think. Now, in less time, we had greater overall average flow, and even the worst performing tanks did significantly better than they did in the previous test. And there's about a 3,000 difference here on this one. So, yeah, and the overall time was much shorter. So, get your pressure up. And even then, like, if I took the time to actually set up a display showing different pressures, like, you would see relative change between the pressure and the flow rates. Because, like, you see the average pressure is, like, well over 10 difference. 24, 24, 16. $28, yeah. This one started slowing down because it started getting full, and then that pressure started jumping up. So that was the big difference of seeing what was going on there. Okay, so now how do we apply all this to an actual practical setup? Well, I've got 2 things that I've built that use these take this knowledge and apply it. Okay, so I'm out here. I have my G2 Optimus Prime tanker trailer truck. I have my career refinery. And I've recently got done pretty much readjusting the refinery recently. The truck is on the workshop. The refinery, this version of the refinery is not on the workshop yet because I've been trying to fix it the entire time around. Now, like I said, we're going to cover some practical application of what I just demonstrated. So for the truck, this is a two-way tank. In other words, it's meant to take fuel on or take a liquid on or take a liquid off. So it's meant to unload or load. Now this has a multi-segmented, system. In other words, it has 4 fluid systems in it to pump the stuff through, as you can see in here. So we have 4 sets of pumps. I've got systems to sit there and pump the gas from the line back that's in the truck back into the truck, so it keeps it pressurized for the unloading. And then I have a number of systems for relieving pressure should the pressure get too high during the process of loading the truck with fluid. So the truck's internal logic manages the pressure in and out so that the truck can keep itself balanced and receive fuel as fast as possible. Now, I apply these same dynamics to my storage tanks. As you can see here, I created that second drain tank I mentioned earlier using the custom doors here. These are 140,000 liter tanks. Right now, I only have the diesel tank filled with fluid, so I could demonstrate the exchange. And then the other thing I have is this nearly 100,000 liter distillation tank. 10,000 for the actual distillation and about 80 to 90,000 for bulk storage. There's a small door right here, a custom door where old oil or the bulk oil can get through down to here, which then I use a hole in here to use for the distillery, for the distillation taps, so they can pull out the jet and diesel and run it into the proper storage tank. And of course, they have their own pressure systems, using these pumps to add pressure so that I can offload the fluid in here out into the truck and remove pressure so it doesn't get bogged up by hitting 60. Because if these things hit 60, forget it. They just stop working. They just stop working. Oh god, they just stop working. As you can see, intake pipes right there. We're pulling in ass. Same here. And I also have a system to remove said gas as necessary. I went overkill because I want to make sure this gets empty. Now, the previous video I made about the refinery, I talked about if you have high enough pressure, you can create a flow through these furnaces without even needing a pump. Still true, still works. So keep that in mind as well. This is the distillation tank, because I have 3 in here. I have this is a bulk warmer. It's actually supposed to warm up the tank, so when it goes down here, it doesn't cool this down near as much and can get processed faster through this. However, these tend to be a little slow. And they do, there is an interesting thing about the speed. I can't exactly prove it, but I have seen like a combined total of greater than 6 liters a second, or 12 combined, 6 and 6 liters seconds of conversion. So, I don't know if they made it faster or what, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, I'm going to show you real quick how I used those things I just showed you to capitalize on transferring fluid from this to the truck, and then from the truck into the bulk tank. So, let me get this set up. So, then all I gotta do, diesel pump out. Now, I made, in case it, it got stuck, like I said, at 60, I have a button here that literally just activates pressure relief, and will just shoot out pressure to relieve its own case. Oh yeah, one other thing though is I noticed the truck kind of can be a power hog when it's doing stuff like this. So I put a electrical cable there to act as a source for any vehicle that might also use a lot of power during the process of transferring. So then over here, I just turn on the 4 port switches, pump in, you can see. Give it a moment, it needs to stabilize, get all that excess pressure out of the way, and then we'll see. Now, this truck is, the tank is just under 60, it's like 59,339 liters. And with this up, we are doing about 200 liters a second. On small pumps. I know you can't like read those at all. I wish I could. So as you can see from our second set, I think it was the 5th setup, we have the pumps coming in here. We got the relief valves afterwards, so they come down. I have the return pressure goes back into the tank, the draining tank, because if you have zero pressure, like zero gases in that drain tank, it will actually stop up the system and flows really stupid slow. But if you take some of the gas and actually just put it right back in to the drain tank, it speeds it up so much significantly. It was like really stupid how fast it did. But however, when I go to actually add pressure to the tank itself, I add it to the top area because the pressure will transfer down to the drain tank. So you only need the minimum amount of gas in the lower area to get everything to run with the drain tank setup that I use. And I use it both here and on this tank. And like I said, the door kind of shut it off and kind of led me to doing it. Because when I originally built this, it was just a cheap way to allow oil to transfer into the distillation tank without having to use pumps. And it turns out it's an effective way to use pressure just to manage it in the first place. We're just rolling good, around 50 liters a second per thing. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stop this now. I'm going to grab this, and we're going to hook up to there. Okay, so the truck, I just put it in pump out mode. So now it's currently trying to build up pressure in the truck so that it can properly do its thing. Okay. And there we go. Like, you can see, this isn't even the fastest I've ever got this truck to go. I think my record for fastest I've had this truck, like, pump out is, like, 464. I got a picture on Discord on it, but, yeah. So, that's how fast it's actually pumping out. Just from, you know, getting it up to, like, that extra bit of pressure. And you see, it's slowly degrading, which is what happens. Now, here's the thing. I was talking earlier about the percentage thing, and the reason why I think this is the case is there's a phenomenon with the numbers that I've noticed. I just call it the 2-digit slowdown. As the tank empties, you'll notice that the first 2 digits will always be the slowest. You know, like, well, that makes sense right now, because it's like 15,000. But when we get down to like 1.3, you will notice the 1.3 will stay there a long time. And as it goes down, the flow rate will go down to match it. The two-digit phenomenon. First two digits. So no matter how fast you have your system built, that percentage of your tank versus that's filled with gas versus the percentage that is liquid will affect your speed so much. And your pressure. Alright, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so basically we went over the demonstration of different setups and different variables that can affect your setups on how well something can pump through a system. Do not, in my opinion, do not pigeonhole yourself to certain setups, because there are different variables that while one setup will work under one circumstance, it won't work under another circumstance. Don't pigeonhole yourself like, oh, this person said do it this way. Even me, like, if you oh, you said to do it this way. If you find a way faster to do it, put it in the comments. Tell us. Something you see that ain't covered, put it down there, let me know. Because I would love to investigate it. Because anything to make me do this faster, I would love to. Because I'm trying to move large quantities in these tanks, and I'm trying to find the fastest way possible. And what I've shown you today is me trying to figure out how to move 60,000 liters from this to that in the least amount of time possible. You know, and that's from having multiple individual piping systems to messing with what it takes to get, you know, the pipe to flow, where to put the filters, you know, everything. Like, maneuvering the gas around. Everything came from just trying to get this place to work and fixed. So, remember to keep that in mind. There is no one golden solution, but there are a bunch of guidelines that you can look at to point you in the right direction. And I suggest that's how you should keep it, and that's how you should take it. So, remember, if it's slowed down, try to add pressure. Just pump air into it, try to add pressure, and see if it'll roll that way. If you can't put stuff into a tank, try to get pressure out. If your source tank is going too slow, try to add pressure to it. Actually, there is one more thing I actually want to show before I actually call quits for this. Okay, so I was planning to end it back there, but I want to show this to give you an idea how much I worked on it and try to get it. This is probably the most common issue people get stuck with on their games in the thing. So I'm going to pump out. You see, we got a pressure of 30 already. I spawned it in with a full tank of diesel. See, 57. It's all there. And we're going to pump in. We'll attach here. See, we are doing 70 liters a second. So as you can see, yeah, it's not just an issue with, you know, with these things. It may be just literally an issue of you do not have enough pressure in your tanks, like your diesel tanks or your storage tanks, to push it out of the vehicle and into these things. This truck is built to do that. So thus it is capable of doing so. Or this trailer is. You can see its pressure is going up. As its flow rate is going up, hopefully as the pressure is going up. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed what you watched. Hope you liked what you saw. If you did, you know the deal. You know the spiel. This is Arcades. I'm signing out. Have yourself a good day. And I hope this helped you a lot. Oh yeah, quick side note, because I mentioned about this and that and adding pressure, there might be also one other problem if you're having issues with this. If you have an older save from before or early in when they added the compressed gases, that might be a bit of your issue because they have like different scripts running managing these things and their pressures, and it could be causing, because you don't have those newer scripts that they use to manage them, you're just getting vapor locked, I think is the word for it. Yeah, probably you're getting vapor locked. I've noticed there's also something you can do if you get stuck, because this never was a thing before. If you have pressure kind of built up, you can hit B and actually now just release whatever pressure is in the system. I found this out the other day talking with some people on Discord, but you can now just do this. You can actually just shoot out fuel from the hose. So you see how, notice it kind of does that. That's the pressure management system in the thing working. In these things working. So, beware of that. You can now spray your fuel out the hose, at least as of the video I'm making. They might fix that later. Don't know. Not sure if that's for the future, which I am not a part of right now. Anyways. Have yourself a good day.